I'm actually thinking about what's going to happen 50 years from now when someone's trying to do research on some random name that they may have found somewhere, and I want there to be some legacy. So that's what got me interested in writing art criticism, was that as a contemporary art historian, I found that especially for artists on cultural fringes, often the only things that survive are short reviews. And as someone who wants to do work on these sorts of artists, or is interested in doing historical work on those sorts of artists, that's often where you have to start off. So my approach to my own criticism is that I'm hoping that I'm leaving behind some sort of residual trace of some of these artists who are going to come and go. And the art world has only gotten bigger, and hence has become a more competitive place. And it's just harder and harder for artists and critics to both get recognized and to then stay recognized. So I don't know how that relates to criticism here, because I'm not that familiar with the history of criticism here, partially because I don't have access to a lot of these languages. I haven't had a chance to read a lot of the critics. So.
Can I just ask a quick question, because I find that really interesting. Sure. With regards, if reviews are there to exist as a trace, future-producing trace in the future, do you think that people read reviews now? Because I'm not sure that they do.
I don't really care whether they read them now or no.
So they're only ever there for the future?
No, that's how I like to think of them having an effect. Whether they do or no, if I start thinking about things in those ways, then I find it not useful for my practice as a critic.
Yes, I agree.
I'm only speaking from that point of view as someone who's trying to write, and what my inroads into criticism as a practice was. And maybe we'll come back to this later in relation to value and judgment, or I could bring it up now, because I've been thinking about that a little bit.
I'm just going to say, because actually you gave me a good point.
Sure.
One of the things that what I was going to say to make the link to the first session was that, it's not the talk about archive, it's not necessarily, we don't need to necessarily burden artists and institutions to archive their own work, which is actually just to keep a record of what they've done, when a layer, at least one layer of arts writing is actually to do that and is to capture crucial moments in a certain, supposedly objective way. But the idea is that, you would have regular coverage and regular stories that would keep track of these things, so that, you can sort of leave artists and institutions to do their thing.
No, and I want to stress this idea of like a temporal jet lag, because I think in retrospect a lot of things get collapsed, and sort of when critics or artists or scholars produce particular works, when they actually produce those works, and then when those works actually have an effect in the art world, if we can say that anything has an effect in the art world, often that gap is long, and it's almost always forgotten that it's long. I was doing some random reading in preparation for this panel, and I read an essay by Boris Groys called Critical Reflections in his much lauded book Art Power. And that essay was originally written in 1997, and that was 13 years ago. And it's a long time, and so that's just something to keep in mind.